Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to give people a minute to start filtering in before we start the conversation. We have a great panel for you today. We have casting professionals, we have acting coaches. So we're going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to get some questions answered, hopefully. Speaking of, if you have a question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask it. If you put a question in the chat, we will not see it. And if we have time for questions at the end, we will get to as many as we can. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started in just a minute. Okay, it seems like it has slowed. Okay, so thank you everyone watching for joining us. Thank you to our amazing panel for joining us. We have a lot to cover today. We're gonna be talking about a lot of topical things, both for the world and the country, and also how that relates to casting and the entertainment industry in general, and what actors can take away from this moment, from a lot of the changes that we've seen this year, and just understand how things have evolved and will continue to evolve until sets and auditions and things can go back to a version of normal that will hopefully be not normal in other ways from before. So we're going to start out by talking about color conscious casting. I think this is on a lot of people's minds right now. This is a topic that's obviously been pervasive in the country for many months now and years before that, but it's been a spotlight in 2020 for many months. And I think that the entertainment industry has had a bit of a reckoning when it comes to a lot of these topics. So to get started, I just want to kind of pose a question to the whole panel and talk about what the term and the concept of color conscious casting means to you and how you implement it. I guess it will be mostly to the casting directors in the panel, but how you implement it and, you know, practice that in your day-to-day auditioning, casting, working with directors and producers, etc. Anyone can start.
I guess I'll start. Well, you know, for me, I come from a commercial background. So, you know, the way commercials kind of work, the client, you know, we get a project and they tell us what they need, and then it's our job to go out and find that. So I have never really been able to, or felt comfortable with, or even thought it was my place to suggest to a client who's come to me to tell them how to cast a role and what the role should look like, unless it's been asked of me. However, when they give us the opportunity to open up the casting to everyone, and they're just looking for all types of people, races, and whatever, that's when I try to make an effort not to just bring in people of color. I mean, like, that's something that I you know, I'm always looking out for, obviously, but I am always kind of just looking to give everybody equal opportunity, because for me, I kind of realized that, you know, it's not just Black people that sort of have issues within this business of getting hired, but there's a whole lot of people who, you know, sometimes when we bring up this issue, it kind of, to me, just personally, always feels like it's a two-person issue. Black and it's white. What about all those other people in the middle that you don't even talk about or even get mentioned in the scenario? You know, so I always try to really be conscious of if it's open to everybody and I know an actor that's right for it, I am definitely always trying to keep it open and give people as many opportunities as they can. One, because you never know who's the right person for a job, you know, and you want to keep your options open. And also because I also teach, I just want to be able to give everybody an opportunity to try and make it in this business. And if I've worked with you, if I've taken a class with you, you know, if we know each other through little auditions here, or if you've come to me for advice and stuff, my motto is just the only way you can really get comfortable with this business and understanding it. I can talk to you, I can teach you till I'm blue in the face, but you're really not going to learn some concrete stuff until you get into the audition. So that's what I'm always trying to sort of do with my castings, and just focus on being exclusive to everyone, you know, not just people that look like me, but people that don't look like me and whoever doesn't have an opportunity. Because like you said, this business has a lot of reckoning to do. What I've been struggling with lately is, you know, I see all these posts and stuff about everybody saying, look, we're doing this now. And now this is our kind of casting studio. And I'm like, that's great. I hope you're not posting it, though, because you want me to congratulate you and pat you on the back for finally doing something in 2020. You should actually be embarrassed and ashamed about it and be like, I'm sorry that it's taking 2020 and a whole collective of noise to now make me want to change my mind. Because if you watch old Hollywood movies like I do, it's very obvious that this business just toes the line. And whenever it gets loud enough, that's when we decide to change. You know, you watch black and white films, they're disgusting to women. They just really are. Like sometimes I sit and I'm just like, I can't even imagine being a woman working in this industry back then. Then you add it to black people or anybody of a different race, and they just seem to be there to serve a purpose for the main character and stuff. And that's been going on for years. Blackface and all that stuff, Fred Astaire's and blackface. So, you know, this has been going on for years, and it seems that the business that I love so much, because I do love this business, seems to only change when there's so much noise and there's so much negativity that they have to. So that's just my spiel.
I want to, yes, and right, because I think before we even I even talk about color conscious casting, I want to say why we reject colorblind casting, right? So I think we got to talk about that one first in order to talk about this one. So colorblind casting means I don't see color, right? I don't see your blackness. I don't see your, your Latinx heritage. I don't see your indigenous heritage. I don't see, it's not helpful for anyone when we say that we are colorblind, right? And the reason for that is because there is a continuous erasure, right, of people of color, of Black folks, of indigenous folks, and of people of color. Let me give you some statistics, right? These are from the UCLA Hollywood Diversity Report. So the School of Social Sciences at UCLA releases an annual report called the Hollywood Diversity Report. I really recommend for you to look at it every single year. But in their 2019 report, they found that only 2.2 out of 10 actors, so that's 2 out of 10 actors in broadcast and scripted, digital scripted TV shows are people of color. That's 20%, right? So in film, it's 3 out of 10 actors are people of color. That's 30%. So you might be saying oh, well, hey, it's not bad. Actually, it is, because when we look at the national employment rate, we see that people of color make up over 40% of the workforce. So if we're only 20% of the workforce in entertainment, we have to double that in order to just match the national average, right? And so we're really lowballing. Black, indigenous, and actors of color in this industry. And for me, that is not just about a question about representation. It's a question about money. Let's talk about the money, right? Because this is employment. This is the sustainability of these individuals as artists, right? So often we say or people will have this cop-out way of saying well, there's not that many Black actors. There's not that many Latino actors. That's not true. That is not true. it's this consistent cycle of erasing them, right? Where like we are not generating enough employment for them, and then we say that they're not around. It's like, well, that's the cycle, right? And so, you know, just to like close off the statement really quickly, I just want to say that one of the things that was mentioned just a few minutes ago was this sort of reckoning about 2020, right? And like one of the things that I want to acknowledge is that there are very few casting directors of color, just even nationally, right? Here in New York City and Los Angeles, and that percentage is lower than 20%. I mean, I would venture to say that maybe it's not even 5% of the casting director industry that are casting directors of color. And one of the frustrating things is that, you know, I'm here in New York City, and I started my own casting company, X Casting. And the reason I started it was because I was seeing that there was a lack of representation behind the table. And for me, in order to have representation in front of the table, you got to have it behind the table as well. It cannot just be one-sided here, right? So for me, it's very important for us to foster the conversation about representation behind the table as well as in front of the table. And one of the things that I want to challenge this panel to discuss is that I actually think that color conscious casting is probably an outdated term by now. And we need to talk about identity conscious casting. And I think that that is really the term that we have to pivot towards, because color is not the only identity here, right? Identity is intersectional. It's about women in entertainment. It's about actors of color who are actors with disabilities in entertainment. It's about trans actors of color. It's about queer actors, right? Even when we talk about representation of queer characters, and we see how often straight actors are playing queer characters, like, ooh, that's a whole different conversation. So I'm just gonna stop on that and say identity conscious casting is my ministry, and I hope all of you continue to talk about it.
Yeah. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Diakeim. Totally agree. So I'm Northern Irish, so I'm an immigrant in America. I'm queer, I'm female, and in that category, I don't know another casting director that has my experience in New York. And if you know them, please get them in touch with me. But I'm very active in my community, so I'm pretty aware of what the situation is, and what's been made blatantly clear at this point, and I'm so happy that people are feeling uncomfortable and we're having these conversations, is that we're not doing enough in casting, right? Everyone I know that works in casting has good intentions. Everyone, 99% of the casting directors I know, their intention is to connect actors with opportunity, but we have missed the mark. We have not done enough work to make sure that it is truly as inclusive as it has to be, right? And moving forward and looking at the stats that Victor shared, you know, similar stats for just women as leads, right? As lead roles, it's, I think it was 1 in 5 movies over a certain budget. I'm sorry, I don't have my stats in front of me at the moment, but are women leads, right? Like we don't invest in 50% of the population, you know. And I think that we have to start. I think that's what's been made clear is that the procedures aren't in place in casting, right? There's not enough guidelines, and people have shied away from that, and now we have to meet it full on. And I for one, I'm excited about moving away from colorblind, because I think that was the intention there was to say I'm trying to be inclusive, but instead actually we were using language that is suppressive in its own way.
That's a great point. Sorry, I thought that Victor was, you were just motioning. So I actually want to go back to something that was brought up in a few ways a few minutes ago. And I don't know how familiar actors are with the role that casting directors play in the decision-making process. I think they know, you know, what they do in facilitating auditions and finding actors and taking meetings. But the point came up that commercial casting and narrative project casting are very different, because in a narrative project, you know, it's kind of it's the creator's point of view. There's not necessarily data or a specific consumer set or something that has to support the choice in casting a commercial or a print ad or something like that. And I don't know how many people know that when a casting director is casting a commercial, there are very strict guidelines that go into that type of prompt, and that there isn't as much wiggle room. So can you talk a little bit more about how, when you get involved, well, I guess first talk about how you get involved in a project and what makes you, you know, want to say yes. And because I do think that there's a kind of a similarity between actors getting interested in a project too, to what casting directors start working on. And also then what your role is once you have the auditions are done, or they're happening, and you're talking with people who are going to either make the next decision or the ultimate decision. And what is that like, and how much influence do you have? I know that probably projects are different, so can you talk a little bit about that? Anyone?
Yeah, sure. For me, I mean, as far as like commercial projects go, like I only really turn down a commercial project if, you know, they seem like they're not coming from they're coming from an odd place, or the client seems a little undisciplined and unsure about what they want to do, or just if it doesn't feel right. You know, normally a project will come our way and say, you know, somebody have a commercial that they have to cast, and they're looking for A, B, and C, and they want it in this amount of time. And, you know, if I am freelancing with someone and we can do it, you know, we go for it. If there's something strange that, like, they're looking for a specific type of character or an actor, and they are very specific about the look of their character in a way that, you know, might not sit well with, you know, putting it out there to other actors, I kind of try and shy away from it, because that's my reputation. But I also shy away from things that don't necessarily going to be fair to the actor. Like, I usually don't take jobs that don't pay the actor, because I just think, you know, pay your talent. They're working, and especially for commercials too, you're going to use this actor to sell your product and make millions of dollars. You could give them a little bit more than $500, I think, you know. But when it comes down to the end process of casting, you know, casting directors for the commercial side of it, we do have some input. There are a lot of times where the client turns to us and they're like, you know, tell me about this person that we are really liking. Do they have a lot of things running? What type of personality do they have? Because we have to be with them on set for a long time. You know, they ask us our input about if we think this role is right for a specific product, or how can we change the role around. So we do have some input. I just did when I'm casting, I like to sort of, my input, whether they ask for it or not, is after the casting, I always sort of give them names of people who I really thought they might gravitate to for the role, just because, you know, sometimes there are so many people and they're like, well, who are your favorites? That's kind of the influence that we have. But in the end, it doesn't really come down. It's not like if I say, yeah, you should hire that person, they're going to hire it. Because remember, even in the callback, all those people in the room, they don't have final decision. They still have to take all this stuff that they've gathered in that room, the talent that they like, and then take it back to who hired them so that they can sell it to them. And then they have the final say, really. So we are just always, I suggest this person. If you hire, you know, Victor, he's going to be excellent. He's very professional and he knows exactly what to do. You're not going to have any problems with him and stuff like that. That's kind of the influence that I have from commercial standpoint.
You know, for actors in casting, there's similar ways in which we get jobs, right? It's referrals, it's networking, it's putting our material into the world, standing by it, feeling proud of the stuff we do, right? So in that way, we are a lot, like we're parallel in how we launch our careers. I've been curious, you know, I think part of this conversation is reimagining as this kind of world, especially in theater, is as quiet as it has to be at this moment. You know, I wonder if there should be more regulation and more conversation about the client casting director relationship, right? Because, you know, there's a little bit of fear with casting directors in the fact that, you know, you only work because of your clients, right? They pay your bills. And so, you know, they have autonomy over your project. And you know, honestly, they have the final say, but we are gatekeepers, and we, again, where does that responsibility lie to make sure that we are asking more of our clients and asking people to break the patterns of casting that may not have been as inclusive as they should be. And so it's been, I used to be a casting director that believed, you know, this is my, you know, this is the breakdown. It's what I've received. I fulfill that particular need for my director, for my producer. And I've really shifted, the sands have really shifted for me in the fact that I'm now asking myself, okay, I have more power, and the buck has to stop somewhere, and we have to take more responsibility. It's not like, oh, well, it's just the opportunities aren't there. Sorry, that's not what they're looking for. I'm not sure, right? I'm asking a question more than I'm answering it right now. It's certainly something that is turning over in my brain, and I talk to a lot of students now that are filmmakers and new content creators, and I'm always saying to them, look, you guys are the script writers, you're the directors, you're going to be the future producers. Ask yourself, do the detective work in your script, and ask yourself, am I applying an unconscious bias that I'm not even aware that I'm adding something, a layer that is not in my script? It is not adding to the storytelling. In fact, it might be subtracting, and it might be taking away from the real experiences, you know, outside this film wall, right? This kind of this creation that we're putting together, and so I'm really excited to see, because it takes all of us, right? It takes writers, producers, directors, and the casting team to really push the buttons here. And we're at an exciting time where I think the next generation, and our generation and the next, can really push this into some interesting places.
One of the things I do also want to add to this conversation is that for me, casting is very much a design and curatorial process, right? And I mean, I cast a lot of theater here in New York City, nationally, regionally, and internationally. And the way that I sort of like, and I know that this is not sort of standard, but for me, having a mission to my company was important. Saying that in my mission, that I am wanting to reimagine the process and the art of casting was important. To say in my mission that in that reimagination, that these processes are anti-racist was important, right? And I said that before 2020. So I'm just trying to like say, like, you know, we are out here. We are like, there are casting directors who have had that sort of like from the beginning, that lens. And for me, it was because this industry hardly ever made space for someone like me also, right? Like I am a first generation American born of immigrants from Mexico. English is not even my first language. So it's like, I come to it as such an outsider. And what I like to think is that my clients come to me because they know the kind of curatorial voice that I have, and that they're interested in collaborating with me because of that voice, right? Because if you're gonna come and work with me, we are not going to entertain any racism. We are not going to, you know, I am going to be very firm if there is bias at play, if something is leaning towards a racist process or anti-Blackness, etc. Like, because my entire development as a human, as a person, has been rooted in that, right? my awareness of it, I can't separate it. It's part of who I am. And for me, it's also, you know, casting is about investment. It's about who I'm investing my time and energy on and with. And for me, it's about who I scout, what I go see, what shows I go see here in theater in New York City, nationally, right? Like I will buy a flight just to go see a play in Chicago because I want to see all the actors that are in a show, right? Or what shows I'm watching on television, what kind of actors I'm keeping track of, who the relationships are with their agents and managers, right? So it's all a very important web, and it's an ecosystem, really. Casting is part of an ecosystem. And so, yeah, for me, I think I'm looking at casting in such a different way that it's not like just paper pushing. It's like, I want you to come to me and treat me like a designer. I'm a designer in this process. And we get to talk about the design of your cast, right? Because it's not just about sort of like default, this cast is all white. I'm curious about like, how do we break this open? What is the alchemy of the story when we put different bodies into it? And how does that impact, right? How does it stretch the story, or how does it focus it? And that last point here is that for me, the thing that we cannot ignore is that when you invite a casting director to work on your project, you're asking for their imagination to be part of the project. And the way that we imagine the world is super important, right? Like I was born in Compton, California. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. You know, my high school had like 1% white people in it. And so I grew up around just such a diversity of folks. And when I read a script, by default, it is majority people of color in my imagination, the way I'm reading a script. Even if it's a historical contextual thing, I'm just like, oh, you know, where am I in this story? Where are the people I grew up with? Where are my neighbors? Where's, you know, where's the world in this story? And so I always come to it with that sort of lens as a casting director.
I love that point that Victor just made, because, you know, when clients come to us, they're coming to us because of the knowledge that we have, the knowledge of actors and talent, how to talk to them, how to communicate with them, and also our knowledge of the business. You know, Ty doesn't know everything about SAG rules and language of putting out a breakdown and stuff. So it's kind of our job, you know, as casting directors, to sort of help them, like Victor said, and be like, listen, you're going down a road that I don't think you want to go down. If somebody gives me a breakdown and the breakdown has language that is just not appropriate at all, whether you're looking for that or not, it's kind of my job to be like, okay, well, hold on. I know that's what you're looking for, but there is no way that I'm going to work for you and put that out in a breakdown, because that's just going to reflect on me. If you're looking for a certain eye shape, well, you look for that when you look at that actor, but don't put that out there, because I'm not putting that out there. If you're looking for a specific skin tone and you're like, well, I only want this type of skin tone, I'm not putting that in a breakdown. I'm going to change that around to help you, because you clearly don't understand the business and how people, what talent is like and how that affects them. So, you know, we do have a lot of influence, and they do come to us for that guidance. And it is our responsibility that when we see something then that's not right, to let the client know, I wouldn't do that. And then if they insist on it and they're like, that's what I want, there is nothing wrong with saying, well, then I need to back out of this. Sorry. You know, nobody's going to shoot you because you walk away from a job. They might remember and be like, she walked away from the job. Why she walk away? Well, because I wanted to say, well, that's why she walked away from the job, you know? So we do have an impact. It may not come down to like super concrete final decision, but we're sort of influencing throughout.
Well, and on the topic of actors, because that's more or less why we're here, because of your expertise with actors, I am curious, because all of you have mentioned how, you know, your knowledge of actors, your investment in actors, so you do all of this research, you have all of this experience so that you can sell people to the people that you're working with and working for. And we have, she hasn't spoken yet, we have our audition and acting coach, Amy, on here too. So I kind of want to get both sides of this from a casting director's point of view. What can an actor do to, you know, make you want to sell them besides, you know, the obvious talent and having a good read and audition? And on your side of things, Amy, how do you prepare actors to go into an audition and to operate between jobs and between auditions so that they will bring something to an audition that a casting director will want to sell when it comes to the decision process? Oh, you're muted. There we go.
Hello. I feel like it's interesting. It's inspiring to hear what is going on in the casting world and how things are changing. And I love that our actors are getting to hear that. There is so much right now that is changing, obviously, over the last 9-10 months on so many different levels. And so when I have my acting students and acting clients, they're a little freaked out, and they're asking themselves, well, how do I stay caught up with all this change? Because it's a tidal wave of change that we're experiencing. And the truth is, I tell them it's pretty simple, that good acting is good acting. That hasn't changed. That's like one of the things that has not changed, is that the fundamentals of what makes someone have a good audition have gone nowhere. It's still about some very simple technique, right? It's really listening and really responding to your acting partner, to your reader. It's about really knowing how you feel about the other person in the scene, the person that you're talking to, about really knowing what you want, what your objective is, and finding interesting ways to go about getting that objective. Those are all things that if you're doing self-tapes, if you're on Zoom, if it's live in person, Zoom live in person, it doesn't matter. That has changed. And so I think a lot of the questions I'm getting, how do I stand out? You know, how do I make my mark and make sure that I pop in an audition when, you know, what can I do to stand out? And my honest answer is really be specific in your choices. I think you want to be creative, not clever, right? So it's not about saying, hey, I'm just going to throw in some weird choice so that I stand out, and the casting directors will be like, oh, what an amazing choice that is. I think you really want to go back to the basics of the work, and you want to fine tune your crafting and make sure that you're playing around with it. You can play opposites, you can find the humor, find the love, but all of that you have to play, that sense of play that you have to do as an actor to prepare for an audition. That I feel like hasn't changed, and that's what I work on with actors before I send them to Victor and Diakeim and Christine.
I say also too that those are great points. I'm always trying to advise actors. You know, your best tool to stand out is your individuality. If you want to stand out, be yourself. I'm not gonna come in and try and be Victor or Christine. Like, all three of us are individuals. That's how you stand out, being your true, authentic self. And one thing that I want to just sort of push is, you know, we all have an imagination that we have to be able to tap into and understand. Your imagination is your best acting tool, if you have one and know how to use it. And by imagination, I mean easily convincing yourself for a split second that something is happening and really doing it. I'm not saying acting, I'm talking about getting lost in that moment. I have a lot of people coming and they perform, and they're, I taught a class once, and an actress did something, and I was like, why'd you make that choice? And she was like, well, I was remembering other commercials that I'd seen. And I was just like, see, that's not being in the moment. That's not using your, that's kind of like a form of sense memory that you're using in a not so great way. You know, tap into your imagination. Now is the time where we're all sitting home. Like you said, that sense of play, Like, you need to really go back to your childhood where you convince yourself that there was a monster there, there was somebody there, somebody made you cry over there, and really sort of get into that for a split. I can do that crap easily, and I'm not even an actor anymore, just because I'm a cinephile. I love movies, film. I eat that crap up all day. So I'm constantly like watching and paying attention to people's emotions and how they sort of react to things. You can just follow people outside. Well, not now because we're all quarantined, but observing people is a great tool that you can discover little nuances that you can then bring into your sort of your acting technique that will really sort of help you stand out that way. And also just being professional and doing your homework too. I mean, I know everybody says that, do your homework, study, and do what you're supposed to do. But, you know, you got to be focused and be in the moment when you're coming into an audition. Sometimes I find people are distracted with other things, and, you know, they'll come to the other room and be like, oh, just something really bad happened to me before, or I just had a stressful day. And I was like, okay, now's the time for you to let all that go, because we got to focus on imagining ourselves, you know, sitting at our friend's house watching a football game and somebody just knocked over a glass and now I'm going to clean it up with bounty, you know, and really being in that moment where, oh my God, the game that spilled, the game, somebody better get up that spill. Oh my God, who's going to watch that? And then pay, you know, really sort of having fun and committing to that playful moment, whether it's good or bad, whatever you're doing.
I think it's also really important for an actress to focus on and know the difference between what they can control and what they can't control. I think that's huge. I think so much of our energy as actors, we worry, am I going to be the right type? Am I going to be the right fit? And none of that really is in your control. What's in your control is your professionalism, your preparedness, how seriously you take your craft and your crafting. That is what you can control. So to not worry about the outcome and have more fun with the process itself, I think that's something that's really important. And as you guys were talking earlier about who's got control about, you know, why someone gets cast or if they get to the next level in a casting, I think that's important for actors to remember, that the stuff you can't control, don't try.
I want to add also really quickly that in today's sort of world and for the foreseeable future, perhaps all of next year, self-taping is going to be monumental. It's just everyone needs to know how to self-tape and how to master your self-tape game, right? And I want to shout out Backstage because I actually use this as a resource to, like, when I'm teaching seminars or talking to actors. There's this this article called, or the Backstage guide called Your Guide to a Perfect Self-Tape. And it's by Cordy Hunt, and it was published on October 20th, 2019. Everybody Google it because it is like different sections. It has like 15 questions answered for you. Like everything you need to know about self-tapes. What is it? What are the benefits? What are the differences? Like what should you wear? What kind of background, microphone, everything. So go to the guide on Backstage and like, please look at it because as other folks have said, like you're doing yourself a favor, but you're also doing us as casting folks a favor. Because if you have a really great tape, you just shine already, right? Like if your background's great, your lighting's on point, your microphone's turned on, now you can just act. So I'm just shouting out because I think it's one of the greatest resources out there right now for self-tapes.
Yeah, Victor, I actually read that. I read that as well, and I think I agree with you. It's an amazing resource. I think every actor should remember that part of their job is to have their self-tape worked out. That's part of your job, is to have your self-tape look as professional as possible. It's not hard to do, and there's kind of no excuse these days for not having it, to send something kind of substandard in when so many people can so easily create good self-tapes now. It just doesn't fly anymore.
Yeah, and just to add to all of that, take the pressure off yourself, right? How about, you know, we all have smartphones. We have the capability of doing something high resolution, right? Making a high resolution video literally in the palm of our hands. And so I've been encouraging actors, even if you don't have an audition right this moment, explore, get curious about other people's tapes and reels out there. There's so much material to look at. You know, what is successful? Gently critique them. What's successful? What do you want to do? Start taping yourself, either, you know, with a reader if you are in a bubble with someone who's an actor, and take turns in doing it. Practice, you know, yourself tapes, do it different angles, do it different ways. Play around with iPhone, you know, iMovie or whatever, your QuickTime player, whatever you want to edit with. And it doesn't have to go anywhere, it's just for you. But that's such a great exercise, right? Something you can do today, regardless if you have an audition tomorrow. Take the pressure off yourself and just kind of digital tapes, figuring out this digital landscape is going to be essential for the next year. So that's what I'm recommending, even if you don't see it as an opportunity right now, and it's not going to make your reel on your website or make it onto your Backstage like profile. You can, you know, you don't have to put it up anywhere, but for you, do the exercise for you.
Yeah, I always tell actors, you know, when there's downtime, there's always something that you can do for your career, always. Why? Because your tool is always with you. You know, what are you trying to get people to invest and sell? And buy into you, right? So if you don't have an acting job and you don't have a book to read about acting, but you go out and you go for a walk, you just did something for yourself because you're taking care of this tool that you want me to look at and invest in. Same thing with just getting comfortable with how to shoot yourself and learning about, because unfortunately now, because of the pandemic, it's not sad, but now talent has to become production also. And a lot of times, you know, you guys, they're actors, you know, like, I didn't get in this to be a cameraman and a sound operator and an editor. I got in this to perform. And unfortunately now we all have to sort of, you know, that Brady Bunch song that I love so much, when it's time to change, you got to rearrange. That's what we all have to do right now. Like, I'm a COVID compliance officer, not because I love it, but because when it's time to change, I have to rearrange. And that's what I'm sort of doing right now. So you guys, all this downtime is a great opportunity to, and you know, we live in a time now where it's so easy to learn so much. You know, just like Victor pointed out, go and look up that self-tape tutorial. You know, go on YouTube and figure out, how do you hold your phone when you're recording yourself? You know, like, I get so tired of saying no. Yes, excellent. That's beautiful. No. No vertical, always horizontal, unless they tell you otherwise. You know, those are sort of things that everybody has to sort of get used to. And I, as a casting director, don't worry, I am totally understanding and prepared to be patient, because Amy, like you said, all of this stuff is just changing constantly, and there's no set way. Like, I could tell you do A, B, and C at an audition, a live audition or a self-tape, but then when you go to get your live audition, they're using a different system that you've never used before. So it's your first time. So now you're learning all, you know, I've done a lot of casting this week, and my first question is this your first live audition? And they're like, yeah, I've never used We Audition before. And I was like, okay, well, now is the time for not only for me to audition you, but for me to pay it forward a little bit and give you a little bit of advice so that you can take it on to the next audition. If you have another We Audition, if you speak to another actor who may have a We Audition or saw a live audition, and you can tell them, give them that bit of advice, so that by the time you get to me again, it's just like, well, you know what to do. Great. Now we can get to the whole point of us meeting over this computer. It's to play, to act, to use our imagination, and for me to get the best performance out of it.
Yeah, there are 3 main softwares I think that you're going to be seeing auditions over and over in the next year. There is Backstage Virtual Audition, there is the We Audition, which Diakeim mentioned, and then there's also EcoCast Live. So those are the 3 things. They all run a little differently. They've all got their own little funky things. And one thing that I'm also going to point out, which is really geeky, be careful what browser you're using, right? If you put a privacy browser, you have a weird extension on your on your laptop or on your phone, you might actually block your ability to share your video and your mic. We've learned that the hard way for our virtual audition stuff, and you know, so just I think that there's just a few things to kind of, they'll be playing around. We're all experimenting. No one lived in this virtual space before March. And so we're all learning together.
Yeah, that was a great kickoff to this other topic that I wanted to get into, which we've already gotten into. But I do want to talk or hear from all three of you casting directors how you have seen, what major changes you have seen and had to implement in your casting, and what you have learned from those things. So self-tapes are nothing new. Actors know that, casting directors know that, they've been around and people have been using them, some productions more than others, but now it's kind of not a choice. And so because of that, what are some things that you've taken away from this kind of experience where everything has to happen remotely for the foreseeable future? You're probably not going to really be in the same room as the creative team or as the actors, and you're maybe sending an actor possibly to a set, or possibly just going to be connecting them with a creative team to produce themselves, like we were saying before. So what are some lessons you've taken away that you think would be helpful for actors to also know, so that they can maximize their chances of, getting spotted or at least being remembered?
Well, one thing that, just from the casting director's standpoint, one thing that I've sort of learned and has been something that I'm still getting used to because of virtual castings, there is a bit of control that casting directors are losing now, especially when you're doing a live casting. Like, I've totally lost my control over the camera, right? And that's something that I even have muscle memory sometimes, where like some people are doing stuff for live auditions and I feel like I got my hand on a camera and I want to move it and I can't, That's something that I've sort of had to learn to get used to. And it's sort of a hindrance, I feel like virtual casting is it's got some positive sides and it's got some negative sides. The negative is that, there's a lot of nuance that you lose when you're not in the room with someone and seeing what their body is doing and sort of demonstrating to them. I know when I do kid castings, like with kid castings, your energy has to match what you want these kids to perform, right? And you can only do so much in a box as to if I'm standing in front of them and I can actually perform and move and show them what I need them to do. So that's something that I'm sort of getting used to. But from the actor standpoint, it's important, guys, that whenever you're doing a live audition, I always suggest to have a hard line connection and don't use Wi-Fi, just because there's always like, dropping out and stuff. I always get worried when I'm doing a live casting and it's cloudy outside. Not so much for myself, but I'm like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen with all these actors? Because unfortunately, this pandemic has pointed out that the internet in this country is just not cool for everybody, and it doesn't sometimes have to necessarily do with how much money you have and what you can afford. You might be in an area where the internet is just constantly dropping out, right? So you want to try and sort of make that part of your audition as easy as possible. One thing I like to suggest, whenever you're signing in for an audition, whatever platform, and if they have like a waiting room, you always want to make sure if there's an area that they have left notes for you, that you go to it right away, just to see. Like, I always tell people, when you sign in for We Audition, first do that speed check to make sure that your internet is running okay and you won't have any wonky issues. But then right after you sign in and you're waiting in the waiting room, go to that chat to see if the casting director has left you, any information. And, try and be as prepared as possible. Again, none of you guys are camera operators. This is all new to you. So you want to try and just have a clean background, have a clean space. If your house is messy and you're a sloppy person, it doesn't take anything to take all those clothes and stick them right underneath the camera right before your audition. The problem is, and when this gets complicated, especially with live auditions, is just like live castings where you go in. Sometimes you'll be in the street and you'll get an audition. Hey, can you show up for this audition really fast? And nowadays, like I did it on camera, and a lot of people that showed up, a lot of them were in parking lots or in a park or in their car, some of them in the basement of where they work. And I'm like, oh, why are you there? And they're like, well, I just got this call last minute. So it's kind of, you know, I've learned that with everything now, you have to be really patient. You have to be patient with technology. You have to be patient with the actors, and you have to be patient with yourself. And know that it's just everything is just slowing down right now. And if we just take our time and try and understand that we're just all sort of taking this step by step, because every day is going to be different. But that's what casting is too. Like, that's one of the reasons why I love casting so much, because it's such a creative job. Like, even when it's boring, it's not boring. Every day I'm like, okay, what do we have to do today? How are we going to figure out this blocking now? You know, how am I going to figure out a shorthand to give my direction to actors so that they can so I'm not spending 30 minutes explaining to them what I need them to do, you know? So it's all very exciting. But at the same time, you know, we have to understand that it's constantly changing. And if you're just patient and try and be as prepared as you possibly can, and don't be afraid to ask questions. If this is my first time doing a live audition, you know, I'm not too, you know, clear on the do's and don'ts, express that to the casting director, because that might stop them and let them slow down and be like, oh, okay, well, I got to be a little bit more delicate with this person.
I think that Amy put it so well, that the work is still the work, right? And Diakeim, you followed that up with, you know, that doesn't mean your audition can be in your car, right? Unless really you're dire straits and that's the only place your Wi-Fi is picking stuff up, right? So I think that's the first point. And then so the work is still the work, you know. Prepare as much as you can. I think Amy's already made that point too. You know, there are things you can control and there are things that you cannot control. And so just do your best to really set yourself up for success. And then the only thing that I'd add, which is kind of tech related, I've already said about be careful of extension browsers that might block your ability to actually share your camera and sound. And then the second point is, most of the time our cell phones have better cameras built into them than our laptops, and so you're going to get a clearer resolution than on your camera phone than you will your laptop. So just double check that, especially if your laptop's a few years old. You might really need to just invest in that tripod to set up your phone, so that is the way in which your audition is taped from, or your virtual audition goes from.
And another thing too, there are live auditions happening on both ends, on camera and voiceover. And one thing that I want you guys to understand about live voiceover auditions is there are some people that really like to have the actor work with somebody before they submit anything, right? And I commend that, because I think the actors get a lot out of it. And specifically for voiceovers, I know a lot of times I've been hired to run a voiceover audition live, and I'm recording, but I'm recording as a backup, right? Just in case something happens. The real recording is happening on your end. So like, again, I'm gonna go back to the audition because that's what I've been using. Say you get an audition and this is where I go back to ask actors, being prepared and drilling your agents for all information that you can get out of them. And, you know, sort of asking the casting director too, and checking that the chat area. But, you know, what I've been doing is I've been running castings where it's a voiceover, you're in your booth, you're doing the recording. The only reason why the We Audition is set up is for communication between the talent and the casting director. So if I can't necessarily see you, it's not the end of the world as long as I can hear you, because I want you to record your takes. And sometimes, like, one of the things that I kept noticing that was happening was people were confused about that. Because it was We Audition, they were like, well, I didn't know I was going to be doing the recording, even though we kind of explained that to them, but, you know, it got lost in translation somehow. So you always want to be just ready in your booth. If it's a live audition, a voiceover audition, just be in your booth. And then if they tell you you don't need to be in there, get out of there. There was something else that I wanted to say, but I forgot. So I'm gonna let someone else talk.
I want to echo the comment that Christine made about laptops versus phones, and say that even if you have the newest MacBook Pro or MacBook Air, that camera quality is awful. So compared to your like an iPhone or a camera phone. So like, don't rely on your computer, period. Like if you have something else, use something else, but do not use the built-in camera on your laptop. It also is not the best with sound, I would argue. The second thing that I wanted to say about this is that this moment, even all of next year, we casting directors we are being forced to be present on virtual space much more than we've ever been. So like, I don't know about you, but like one of the trends that I notice about a lot of casting directors, and you know, to Christine's point, casting directors are a really great community. Everybody's really, really fantastic, you know. But one of the things that I've noticed about our field is that people are very private. There's a lot of casting directors that are very private and really, really like love their privacy. So right now, what you're noticing though is that some of those casting directors are popping into Instagram and doing IG lives and doing classes for free on their Instagrams, or they are tweeting more, or they are participating in seminars and panels and discussions and teaching classes. And the great thing about that is that now all of you have access to that. It doesn't matter where you're living. You don't have to be in Los Angeles and Atlanta and Chicago and New York. You could be anywhere and you could be participating in these classes digitally. So what I would say is right now, like, find out who your favorite casting directors are by going to the TV shows that you love, the films that you love, the theater shows that you love, and finding out who the casting directors were for that. And then write them down and then look them up on Instagram, on Twitter, see if they have websites, and just follow them. Like, who is it? Oh my God, I can't remember her name. Is it Kim Coleman? No, I can't remember which casting director, but they're like very active on Instagram, and like on Mondays, they do like monologue Mondays or something. It's not Kim Coleman. I can't remember who it was, but like on Instagram, they'll just like do IG live with actors on Monday nights. So, you know, follow these people and then see how active they are on social media, and what's coming up for them, because you might be able to interact with them or learn from them directly and have opportunities that would have never been available to you, even if you lived in the same city.
That is amazing advice, and it actually segues well into how I kind of wanted to end our time. And I'm so sorry we don't have time for viewer questions, because we've had such a great conversation that now it's almost 4 on the East Coast. So we're almost at the end of our hour, but kind of going off of the amazing advice Victor just gave, I did want to end with the rest of the panel kind of offering what their suggestions or their advice is. General advice is great, but especially in a time when a lot of actors are, you know, not working. There aren't as many jobs or notices being posted, but there's different types of work that's out there, and there is still, I mean, casting directors are still casting, so there is still stuff to be done. And if you're not auditioning, you can still be doing things too. So the rest of the panel, what advice do you have for actors to, you know, stay encouraged, stay, you know, in shape in terms of their craft and their skills during this time?
I've been telling a lot of my my acting students and clients that there's just never been a better time to learn and practice how to self-tape. That this is your chance to do the research, buy a backdrop from Amazon, make sure you've got, you know, an uncluttered background, make sure you've got the right camera, make sure that your sound is right, and then, like I think Christine was saying earlier, practice, find scripts and get someone to read with you and watch it back. See what you can learn from yourself, learning angles, learning what looks good. There's so much you can see when you watch it back, little mannerisms that we have that you don't realize you have. that maybe in the past you don't have the luxury of spending that much time watching yourself. Well, you do now, and it's part of your job. So that would be my advice: is rehearse, tape it, look at it, get your self-tape game down.
And Victor also brought up a great point just about networking and how to get familiar with like people who you may want to work with and stuff. Like he brought up some great points about Instagram and stuff like that. I'm always saying this in panels because I learned this year and it's been beneficial to me, is LinkedIn is another great tool once you actually know how to use it. I always tell the story where I hated LinkedIn. I really did not like it at all. And I was on it for years, but I thought it was garbage. I really did. And then I took a class and they told me, it's not garbage, Diakeim, you're just using it like garbage. And I was like, oh. And then when I figured out how to use it, it became very beneficial to me in a way that took me some time to understand too, because again, like this business, not everything is going to happen when and the way you want it. But if you're consistent in this business, the people who make it in this business are the people who don't give themselves an out. And that can go for so many other things, right? So, you know, once you, I've been using LinkedIn to, you know, just promote classes and acting and all types of stuff that I do. But there are days when I'm just like, I get so tired of posting. I get so tired of trying to think of something to post that's creative. It's just exhausting and I'm not seeing any results. Just because you're not seeing results immediately doesn't mean that people aren't noticing you. So, you know, that's a great tool for you to use to sort of network again, because people are home and they are a little bit more receptive to maybe having a conversation and a dialogue with you. And you know, like Amy said too, practice, practice, practice. A great tool, a great exercise that I think you all should practice, because this is something that I think every actor, whether you get hired for something, whatever it is, you're always going to come up against this moment. I've learned this in casting and being on set as a COVID compliance officer, where I'm watching the actors. There's always some point in the day during the shoot voiceover where the director's going to come up to you. They're going to give you one line, and then they want you to just say it over and over again, different ways, until the director gets tired of you and they have enough different options that they want to go with, right? So when you're home, just like Amy said, recording yourself and seeing what it looks like, try and take a little segment, a piece, whatever it is you want to use, and practice it and see how many different ways you can approach it. And I'm not talking about stop at 2 times, stop at 3 times. Go see in 10 times how many different ways you can say a line, how many different ways you can approach a piece. Record yourself and then watch and say, were any of those different, or was I just doing the same thing over and over again? Because if you're doing the same thing over and over again, you got to work on that. All right. I'm not having you repeat yourself. I don't need to hear you say your name 3 times the same way. I want you to say it 3 or 4 times over and over again, because I want to see what type of range you have, how creative you are. It's the sort of a way for me to gauge what type of creative person you're going to be on set, because things are constantly changing on set. And, you know, I need to know that if I decide I want to approach the script this way, it's not going to take you all day practicing to get there. And that's sort of a great sort of exercise. You know, how can I say, today at McDonald's we have a sale? How many practice that 10 times, record yourself. And if you listen to it and you're like, all of those sound the same, that's something you need to work on again.
You guys have covered kind of work angles so beautifully. So I'll just add, you know, develop your passions. One of your passions is acting or directing or whatever side of the casting table has brought you to this conversation today. But you are hired and people want to work with you because of you. And so, I really recommend that you really dive into that. Like, just look how beautiful and focused Victor is in his work, because he's mission focused, right? Because he is driven by the passion that he's really worked on, like his mission statement as a casting director, and things. Developing your whole self is just so important, right? Like, you know, I like to think of this example. You know, Lin-Manuel Miranda, he picked up the Hamilton book in an airport bookstore, right? There is no way that he knew that by picking up a book to read on a beach when he was on his vacation, that he'd write a musical that would form like such an important part of this generation's way of thinking about musicals, right? But but the act of reading, writing, watching television, journaling, walking, investing in yourself will create a better, fuller picture of who you are as a creative person. And so none of it's wasted. It's all part of you, the creative person, you, the full self. So that is something that I would highly recommend.
I love that, because one of my things I always tell actors when I'm teaching them is it is so important for you to have a life outside of this business. You have to have something else going on other than acting. So if I bring you in and I want to talk to you about what's been going on with you, the first thing out your mouth is, well, I've been auditioning a lot. And I'm like, I know you're an actor. I don't want to hear that. I'm trying to get the client to understand you from on a deeper level, on a more personal level. Remember, they gotta have to spend maybe weeks and hours with you, you know? And also having a life outside as an actor, that's one of your most powerful tools, because then you can take that outside life and bring it to things that you need to ground and make real and make believable. And if you don't have any outside, I know it's kind of hard right now, but you know, we're having some experiences, be that in the house or, you know, whether we're quarantining or whatever, but it's important for you to go out and explore so that you can bring something to the table, to your acting, that will sort of, you know, we're always trying to convince, with your acting, I feel like it's always like, you got to convince me that you're not acting, right? So having life experiences, and, you know, I always tell somebody, if you can't take an acting class, just get on the subway. Well, not now, but just get on the subway and ride it and watch people, watch how they talk, watch how they use their hands, watch how they interact with one another, watch how they sit still and stare into space. Observe everything, so that when you know it's time for you to come into a commercial casting where all they want you to do is be on your phone, you're not like this. You know, you're like, well, I know how I am when I'm on my phone. So let me just sit in that natural ability and be okay with the fact that they just want me to be on my phone doing nothing. I don't have to perform that. I can just sit and do nothing and keep it natural. And that sort of, the little life outside experience can do wonders for your acting.
That is more great advice. And as evidenced by so much of this conversation, we could probably be here for hours talking about.
I can't believe it's over.
We're talking about these topics, many more topics. I'm so sorry that we didn't have time to get to some viewer questions, but I hope that you had some questions answered in this great conversation. Thank you again to our panel. Thank you to everyone for joining. And I hope that everyone stays healthy, stays safe, and, you know, finds a way to work on their craft, whatever their craft may be during this time, because I think a lot of us always wish for more time at home to try to work on something, and now we have it. So good luck to everyone, and, you know, keep an eye out for all of our panelists. I'm sure they have much more to share during this time.
This situation will pass, everybody. There's going to be a time we're all going to be looking back and be like, remember that pandemic? Remember when we were all Zooming? Oh, yes, that was such a nightmare. And we're going to laugh about it. It might not be till the end of next year, maybe. You know, we still might be doing all this. But, you know, this is a great way for us to get to know each other, so that when we see each other out in person, we're like, hey, now I know you. Know, it's so easy getting to know you from my living room, you know, over Zoom, because I probably would have never met Victor or Amy or Christine in the outside world, because we're all so busy moving and stuff. So this is a great way to sort of just get to know everybody and realize that there is a community of us. And, you know, casting directors, guys, are the most, I know, I feel like I get this from you guys, but we're for the actor, we're always on your side. My job is to make you look good. It's not to make you look like crap. Because if you look like crap, it's just going to fall back on me. The director's not going to call you up and be like, you are an awful actor. They're going to call me up, be like, Diakeim, that wasn't great. Either do another one, or we're just going to move on to somebody else. So I, as a casting director, I'm always rooting for you. When I give you a 1 or 2 or 3 takes, it's really because I want you to shine like a light, and I want the client to see that. So know that casting directors are always on your side until you start to get a little wonky, and then we're like, okay, get out.
Yeah, it's a good place to end. Thank you again, everyone. And, you know, stay healthy, stay safe, like I said, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again to the panel.